perimeter with 1:15 left on this 5-minute major. Puck put in front, Quap the save, rebound loose, backhand,
oh my goodness,
scores, and he shot that one between his legs, did Michkov.
Hat trick. Watch this here, folks. This is unbelievable. Matvei Michkov with the incredibly quick hands. Nice puck work around by the Russians. As number 17, keep your eyes on him here. The puck pops out. It's rolling on him as it comes out here, and he is going to just put it right between his legs.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 231. As the Flyers are starting rookie camp, that all gets going, Thursday? Rookie camp. We're going to finally get to take a glance at Matvei Michkov. We're brought to you by FlyersNittyGritty.com and Jim South Street. We'll get to Jim's later. Our buddy Chef is watching the Phillies, so he gets the night off, but we welcome back from the land of the rising sun and many other places. He's back with us, finally, the great Dan Silver. Dan, how are you?
He's doing great.
He's doing great.
Yeah,
so,
he's frozen.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, he's frozen. Yeah, it's a Frozen 4. No, it's a Frozen 3 tonight. All right, so we're going to bring on our guest. He's a Flyers pre-intermission and post-game host of the Philadelphia Flyer broadcast. And, of course, he's got the Flyers Daily Pod. He's been with us many times. Glad to have back with us Jason Myrtetus. Jason, welcome aboard, man.
I'm going to answer for Danny. I love his travels. I am not well traveled. Like, I've traveled North America, all through Canada, and decent amount in the U.S., not a ton. But, like, following his travels along on social media, like where he ends up in the restaurants and some of the stuff he's eating. He's like an episode of Anthony Bourdain, like traveling the globe. So I appreciate his travels because it gives me a little sneak peek into the areas that Danny goes to all around the globe. I mean, eating like worms and escargot.
He's got everything. The great Dan Silver. Have you joined us for well?
I have. I don't know. My Wi-Fi's not working. All kinds of stuff's not. My Wi-Fi's gone out twice already. So now I'm on the little jet pack or whatever. But yeah, I'm here. I'm glad to be back. Yeah, I didn't hear what you guys were just talking about, but yeah, I was over in Japan for a work trip. The horse racing industry takes you everywhere. So I was over in Japan, eating the best sushi you could imagine, and seeing some of the scenery over there, some of the horses. It was nice, but I'm itching for some hockey. Let's get it going.
You got it. So the puck drops on the Flyers season in 32 days with the season opener in Vancouver on October 11th. And the next night they play again in Calgary. So they start on the road. And but before that, a lot is going to happen. And Jason, the Flyers rookies are coming to town, like we talked about earlier. And there's going to be a lot of focus on one player, but there's a lot of other players that people are looking forward to seeing. Why don't you tell us what your impressions are, what you're looking forward to as this rookie camp opens on this Thursday, the 12th?
Well, I mean, obviously one of the storylines is a guy that apparently isn't going to not show up, and that's Alexei Kolosov.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the fact that, you know, some of the most recent reporting I know from Anthony DeMarco has indicated that he's not going to come, and he has been skating with his Dynamo Minsk team. And, I mean, they're going to be left no choice. They're not going to loan him, but they're going to be left no choice but to toll the contract a year if he decides not to come over. He's not a tradable asset. So, I mean, that's one of the storylines going on. I really wanted to see him. I got a little look at him, you know, when he came in last year and played a couple of games for the Phantoms and got to see him take warm-ups in person for that playoff game. And he is small. I mean, he is like UC Saros size, but very explosive in his movements. But far from a sure thing when it comes to the goaltending position. So a guy that's refused to come over, going back on his word. And, you know, I mean, I don't think any team's going to trade for him if he's like kind of waffling about coming over. He's no value. So that's one of the storylines. But I mean, obviously Michkov is one of them. But there's a few guys that I'm really interested to see because I like to have that where were they last year benchmark and then where are they this year benchmark. And I'm talking about two of Danny's favorites, Bonk and Barkey, first and foremost. And I think we'll see both of those guys in the rookie games coming up on Friday and Saturday in Lehigh against the Ranger rookies. And we got to see him last year in those games. Jett Luchanko, to me, is fascinating. I didn't know a ton about him on draft night. You know, I'm not one of those draft guys. I don't have that kind of time to do that. But in learning more about him and seeing the nuance of his game, he looks like one of those guys to me that could be, even though he's not supposed high-end talent, he's one of those guys that could pathway to the NHL much quicker than a lot of other guys. And he's really young because he just turned 18 2 weeks ago, youngest guy in the draft, in his draft class. So I'm real interested in Luchanko because every time I watch him, the skating is just so dynamic, right? And you go, okay, when he levels up, is it still going to look that? I think that's one of those guys that when he levels up, the skating is always going to stand out. I think he's just a great athlete. And when I talk to him, he is really fit and thick already for a young guy. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, when COVID hit, a lot of my friends that I played hockey with were just playing video games during COVID. He's like, I got my dad to build me a gym in the garage, and all I did was work out. And you can tell, like, dude is thick already. So I'm really interested in seeing him. You know, there's another guy I'm real interested to see because I want to see if he's got it kind of the nose of the aircraft pulled up, and that's Elliot Denoye. He was horrible last year. Horrible. He was really good the year before, and maybe that set some expectations for some people that he'd be an offensive player as he led the team in goals at 23 as a rookie in the NHL. He's not going to be that, but he's fighting for even a chance to play in the NHL now. So he's got to find his way back into the organizational plan. And Tuamal is another guy that I think is really. We're going to see a ton of him in preseason. He's going to get so many opportunities throughout the preseason. He's going to be a storyline. I think he's going to play both games in Lehigh, and we're going to see him in preseason to really measure where he is as a prospect as well. He had a good year last year.
Yeah. Dan, what are some of the other thoughts you would add on to that, and maybe some other players that are on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into the Kolosov situation, so I'm not really going to touch more on that. One guy, and I don't know exactly who's going to be there. One guy that's going to sort of be interesting to watch as the season goes on and how he develops is Hunter McDonald, who is a big defenseman that I know that, Keith Jones loves talking about. They seem convinced that he's going to be a impact second or probably third pairing NHL, or he's the kind of guy that, like, when you look at his stats in college, and he's going to be a defenseman, but even the guys who turn into really good defensive defensemen in the NHL, usually those guys still have some production, like in college or at the junior levels. And Hunter McDonald doesn't really have it, but the Flyers seem convinced that he's basically going to become a solid NHL defenseman. So he's a guy I'm kind of like looking forward to seeing how he develops. Another guy that Jason didn't mention that I'm really interested to see what happens with him this year is Emil Andre, because he's a guy that coming into last year, I think most people in the Flyers organization felt was, maybe him and Bonk, maybe, a clear-cut 1 and 2 in terms of defensive prospects in the system. And he's a little bit smaller. He kind of plays like a pit bull, but he's got some offensive talent. He can quarterback the power play, and defensemen take longer to develop. He kind of had an up and down year. I'm kind of interested to see with that full year of North American playing under his belt, how Emil Andre looks. And another guy, I don't know if he's going to be in camp. Maybe Jay, maybe you would know, is that kid Jack Berglund, who they took in the second round this year, Swedish player. Because there was an interesting article I was reading, Charlie's Q&A with Brent Blair, and it was talking about how his feet are 2 different sizes, and so he never had the right skates on, and maybe that was a reason why his skating was kind of lackluster. And they finally got him, proper skates, and apparently since then he's been really good with a good start to the season.
He looked good at development camp too. He just popped. Yep. Yeah,
and I don't know if he's going to be in development camp. I don't know how it works with those Swedish kids or in rookie camp, but he'd be a guy I'd kind of be interested in seeing. So those are some of the guys that that Jason didn't mention that I'm kind of interested in seeing.
Yeah, I think Emil Andre is really interesting because I think he came in last year in camp and he really surprised them. He kind of put them to a decision, and because he was just good all the time. And I totally agree with Dan, because when you watch him play, his head is always up and moving. He never is playing mental catch-up on the ice. Mm-hmm. When he gets the puck, he already knows where everybody is because he is so aware as a player. And you see players that have tons of skill that have no awareness on the ice, and it drives you crazy. They get the puck, and then they just try and figure out they skate themselves into jail, whatever. Andre always seemed to be ahead of the play in that regard. And I think he really shocked them last year. And obviously they were worried about the size, and I think we saw it when he played in the 4 NHL games last year. He's got to learn how to mitigate the size disadvantage. He is very, kind of chemo-like and, that low center of gravity and really strong down below. But you saw him get tossed a few times physically playing against the best players in the world because you don't have time to brace yourself the way he did when he was playing overseas. So he's going to be an interesting one. I think he didn't have the greatest year last year, but I think for him last year, like Dan said, was about the total adjustment to the North American game and playing with men to figure out how he could position his body in board battles and how he can, use his awareness and his vision on the ice to not put himself in those situations. So he is a really interesting one. I really like watching him because he's a very cerebral player. And you just feel like when you watch him, anything's possible at any point when he gets the puck. The head is up, and he is just surveying. So he's another one. Getting an Adder, too, I guess they probably won't be in rookie camp. But where do they fit in, They're not waiver exempt anymore. Zamula is not waiver exempt. So how does the blue line kind of play out? I think we'll get some early indications on where some guys are in the rookie camp, and then certainly leading into training camp, and we'll see who kind of performs. Once preseason games start and kind of peels back, the coaching staff's eyes. There's always a couple, Lixell a couple of years ago was one of those guys that Torra had no clue who he was. Just kept looking at his sheet and going, who is that? Oh, it's Lixell again. He just kept finding himself around the play. He's got a lot of work to do, but still. We'll see who those guys are. But I think there's some intriguing prospects in the rookie camp. Just overall, I'm really excited about Barkey. And looking at him at development camp, so much is made about how young he looks and his size. He's not as small as you would think. Just because he sounds like a teenage Justin Bieber does not mean he is built like that. The kid's 5'9.5". He's not tiny, but he's just so dynamic and he floats on the ice. And he's a gym rat apparently too. I just really want to see how he measures up this year compared to last year.
Yeah, that should be interesting. I mean, a guy like that, you want to see what he's going to do in what, is probably going to be his final year of juniors and see if he can replicate what he did there. Because he
did something in junior last year I was really impressed with.
Yeah.
He didn't make Team Canada's World Junior team. And one of his teammates did. And he had to take over that spot while his teammate was gone. And what did he do? He didn't pout about not making the team. He freaking ate. I mean, he went off in that stretch. So that tells me a lot about like kind of the competitive makeup of a guy. To me, he's just kind of an infectious personality. I don't know him by any stretch of the imagination. I spent some time with him and talked to him and had some interviews and stuff with him. And he's just very likable. So I'm rooting for him so hard because I think he's such an NHL player of today that can be really dynamic.
Yeah, and no doubt about it. Before I want to mention something about Emil Andre. You know, I look at a guy like Jared Spurgeon, and he's got a wide variety of tools. But, I mean, that is an example of a defenseman who's much smaller than average defenseman. He plays very high in the lineup for Minnesota, has for many years. I mean, it's possible. And when you talk about the awareness that Emil Andre has, yeah, he's probably not going to ever be as good as Spurgeon is, but it's possible. Some of the qualities that are internalized already by Andre. So that would be very interesting.
What did people think of Chemo when he kind of came in? You know what I mean?
And he took forever. He was like a 9th round draft.
I mean, he didn't even get here until he was 32.
Yeah, 32.
And think about how good he was. I mean, like, and that guy. I mean, the body type is just so obviously similar, you know, and the way that they kind of approach the game is so you can't help but draw a comparison. And Chemo was fantastic. Like, he was so good because he was so strong off the rush and angling guys into the boards because he had that low center of gravity. And even though he was like such a docile personality, man, just such a competitor. So I'm hoping there's just some of that in there. That would be great. That'd be a hell of a find if that's the case.
Yeah, definitely. You know, Dan, one of the players that could get a look, even though he's not probably going to make the Flyers, but maybe could play well enough to get a couple games as a reward, would be Oliver Bonk. What do you see with that player outside of Bumper Bonk and that what he's doing with London on the power play? What do you like or whatever about that player?
So let me touch on Bonk and Luchanko really quickly. I mean, Bonk, again, the stats are a little bit misleading because he got a lot of his points, especially some of those goals, playing the bumper spot on the power play. And obviously that's not a bad skill to have when you're going to the NHL as a defenseman, but he's probably, not going to be – he's certainly not going to be quarterbacking an NHL power play, I don't think. Maybe he could play some bumper. I don't know. But regardless, what he's really just like – I mean, he does everything well. And the poise that he has – you can it comes from probably having a father who was one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL and growing up around NHL locker rooms. You just watch Bonk play and he just knows what to do. He has the poise, he has the positioning, he doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. And to trail on one of the things that Jason mentioned was with Barkey, he didn't make the World Juniors team. And he picked up his play during that stretch, which tells you a lot about his character. Well, I'm even more impressed that Oliver Bonk last year, basically the goal that ended the Team Canada World Junior Championships went off of Bonk. Like, it was a deflection that went off of him. And, one of those things where if it happens in soccer, like, your own fans, like, never let you forget about it. Like, it's almost like an own goal. He came back and he absolutely tore it up. Like, when he got back to London. And it just, again, tells you kind of like the head that he's got on his shoulders. And again, a lot of that probably comes from his upbringing. A lot of it comes from playing for Dale Hunter's London Knights team, who they do such a good job, transitioning these young men to playing the NHL. So, Bonk's a guy who I think, like, at a minimum, he's going to be a second pair NHL defenseman. And I still think there's like a lot of upside there that he has. Watching him and Dickinson again this year for London, assuming that Dickinson doesn't make the Sharks team out of camp, those guys should absolutely dominate. Bonk and Barkey again this year. Bonk obviously should be a top pairing guy on Team Canada. Hopefully Barkey will make the squad. So I think Bonk's a guy who's going to come in and he's going to probably be able to fit in with NHL players. in a short stretch, just because he's got all of what it takes to fit in with them from the start, right? He's got the size, he's got the poise, he's got the ability, he's got the instinct. Luchanko's an interesting one because, I've heard a couple people mention that, he might have a shorter runway to the NHL, and Jason mentioned that a little bit. He's a guy that, like, I really want to see him marinate in the juniors just to, like, get those offensive skills, right? Because he's, who he reminds me of is, he reminds me a little bit of Oliver Moore, who obviously was just taken the year before, but who's just like a phenomenal skater. I don't know if Luchanko's quite as good a skater as Moore, but the offensive potential you didn't really know about with Oliver Moore because he was playing second fiddle behind Will Smith on that U.S. national team. But clearly you didn't have the offensive skill that pops like a Will Smith, right? Luchanko is one of those kids, and it's interesting because at the draft, I looked at him and I'm like, okay, he's one of the youngest players in the draft, but he doesn't look like it.
No.
Jason mentioned that he looks a little older, but also he's physically, like, he looks like his dad built him a gym, right? Like what Jay mentioned. Yeah. So he's a guy that, like, he might come in and just because of his skating, which is one of those things that just pops, people might be like, oh, this guy could, be in the NHL now. And I really want to see him develop those skills, right? Because I don't know if he has the offensive upside, let's say, that like a guy that like a Braden Point has or something like that. But, like, I'd like to find out. And I think he probably, needs to develop that a little bit in junior. So he's a guy that I agree that he may look immediately like he could fit in the NHL, like on a third line. But I kind of want to get to see him develop those skills a little bit in the juniors. So those are kind of my thoughts on those two guys.
And the thing is with Luchanko, too, pending obviously how he does this year with Guelph and how close he looks, it could force the Flyers to make some decisions on two players in particular. And the players I'm thinking of are Scott Laughton and Noah Cates, to figure out what you're doing with these players. I feel like those two players, and they're obviously at such different points in their career, but I don't know. They kind of need a compass on where they fit in, because I don't know where either fit in. There's some redundancy with Laughton and Paling. There's, with Noah Cates, is he a winger? Is he a center? He had the really good year playing center when Couturier was out, but last year he really struggled. I know he dealt with an injury, but, he couldn't throw it in the ocean prior to the injury. So where are you with can you get more offense out of him? Is he a fourth-line player? I'd love to have a guy like that on my fourth line. A great stick, great checker, and all those things. It's almost like having two third lines. But, where do these two fit in? And Luchanko may play a part in that. He, pending how he does this year, could determine that. And obviously the third guy of kind of the trickle-down effect is also going to be Morgan Frost. Is he a guy that you're committing to? You either got to get off the pot with Morgan Frost here. Like, I said this all summer, and I'll say it again. You do not healthy scratch him under any circumstance this year. You can bench him in a game. I don't care. You can bench anybody in a game. But this, putting him in the press box, and you can't do it. You either got to commit to the 82 or make a move. If at any point you decide you can't commit to that. So I think all those things, I think that's why this is such a big year. I think next year there's a huge reset year based on the information we get the last 2 years to some degree, but in particular this year. Because it's the end of the runway for a couple of guys. And there's some other guys knocking. And with Michkov here now, I think it changes the urgency of everything to next offseason when they're going to have a lot of money coming off the books.
Yeah, Dan, before I get to you, I just want to say I'm in agreement with Dan about Luchanko because, you pass on a guy like Hellenius, who has superior puck skills at this stage of the game, and you want to give Luchanko a chance to, like Dan said, develop those skills, because once you get into the pros, he's going to hang on for dear life to never, ever, regress. And, as physically developed as he is, and as much as he may check a lot of boxes that show maturity in his game, and he has a pro aspect to his game, that skill development could determine whether he's a first or second liner or he's stuck in the bottom of the lineup. And I'm at this point with where they're at, I know they need centers, but I think that's real important, especially if you're going to take a leap on a guy like Luchanko. Dan, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, it's kind of, we mentioned Scott Lawton before I get into what I was going to say. With your Luchanko point, he's a guy that I kind of felt was like rushed to the NHL a little bit, Scott Lawton, who I think maybe could have developed better offensive skills if they sort of had let him maybe marinate one more year. I think he had one full season in juniors, and then he joined the Flyers after that.
And then the year after, he spent the year back in AHL.
Right. The what Jason was talking about, I think that there were a number of forwards that going into the offseason, that at least a few, that if you'd asked Danny Briere, he would have been like, yeah, I don't know if they're going to be on the team going into camp next season, right? Like, I think they did potentially want to try and move Joel Farabee to try and get a center, right? And for whatever reason, it didn't work out, right? I think maybe some of the guys that they were potentially targeting, they decided that maybe they were not centers, right? Like maybe they're wingers, like maybe Trevor Zegras is a winger, that kid on Carolina, who was no one knew,
Natchez.
Yeah, Natchez. Like maybe they decided he was a winger, right? Maybe the trades never materialized, but I do think that they were probably open to moving Joel Farabee to try and bring in a center. Like Scott Lawton is a guy who has been mentioned in trade talks for a while, still here. Noah Cates, I don't think probably they've looked at trading him, but they like him a lot, still here. Like, what are they? I mean, if you look at their lineup right now, who is the odd man out? Because, really quick, if I just go down the lineup, like, okay, on the left, Forster, Tippett, Farabee, Delorier. I don't think they're going to want Michkov playing in that many games early on, that Delorier's not on the roster. I'll just say that. Like, I think that they're going to want him in there just in case someone goes after Michkov. Center, you've got Frost, Couturier, Paling, Lawton, and Cates. Like, who's the odd man out there? And
I think one of those guys moves to the wing. I think Lawton moves to left wing and Cates is in the middle, or vice versa.
But that's fine. But then who is
Delorier comes out.
Like of Forster, Tippett, Farabee, and Delorier are you sitting on the left? And on the right, you've got Michkov, Konechny, Hathaway, who I think you're going to want in the lineup. And I think that they're going to want to have Bobby Brink probably playing NHL games. So, like, if you move Lawton or Cates to the wing, it's either going to be, I guess, Delorier or Brink, who's not playing. And I'm just not sure, like, I don't know. I'm interested to see how it's going to pan out. And obviously there's always injuries. But
I think Delorier doesn't play any more than 18 games. I mean, he barely played last year. I just don't think he can play anymore. He can't skate. He can't skate.
Yeah, I know. I mean, listen, one of the first things that Briere said after they brought Michkov into the arena was, like, he joked, like, we showed him some video of Delorier and said, this is your new best friend. Now, I understand that's tongue-in-cheek, but I also think that they are going to want to make sure that Delorier is in the lineup for some of these games to protect Michkov. I know there's other guys, Hathaway and stuff like that. Yeah. But I do think that Delorier signed for almost $2 million a year for the next 3 seasons. Like, I guess maybe two more. But anyway, I just think that's going to be something interesting to watch, because I don't think that they necessarily thought that Farabee was going to be on the roster coming into this season. So
I think that's fair when it comes to Farabee. And one of the listeners of Flyers Daily brought this up in the comments section on YouTube the other day, that actually an emailer, and I thought it was a really apt comparison, and we'll see. But has Farabee come back this year after his name was out there quite a bit this summer? His name was involved in a lot of rumors, not to the same extent the year prior that Sanheim was, because there was a deal for Sanheim. The only reason it didn't happen is because Torrey Krug said no. Thank God, by the way. But Sanheim didn't pout about it. Sanheim came in last year and didn't say, well, they didn't want me, and I got this huge guy. He said, I'll come in and I'll prove it. And he worked his ass off. I think he's really stepped up in the leadership position as well. And part of that was Provorov leaving for sure, opening that oxygen and kind of getting that anchor of lack of leadership from Provorov. But does Farabee fall into that bucket this year where he comes in, had a really good first 2/3 of the year last year, and then went ice cold after January? I mean, it was horrific. So he's been here all summer. He's been working out. I know, to me, he's a guy that really wants to be here. He loves the camaraderie of the guys that play here. Like you see all the Instagram pictures with him and Paling and all those guys hanging out all summer. Tyson, Forster, Tippett. They're all like they have a really good friendship teammate thing going on. He loves the city, loves baseball, loves the Phillies. So does he fall into that category? I think we'll know really early when it comes to Farabee if he's going to come in looking like, okay, I got something to prove. I had my best statistical season last year, but I got to play a full 82 instead of 2/3 because I was horse in the last third of the season. So we'll see about that. But yeah, his name was out there. There's no doubt about it. And I think that can bruise guys. I think it absolutely does, especially when it's the first time your name's really out there. You feel rejected. Like these guys aren't used to feeling rejected. They're not used to being a guy that we need to get this guy out of here. Any team that they've ever played for, they were like the man growing up, right? And when you feel like a sense of rejection for the first time, it can really send a guy sideways. Sanheim didn't pout about it. He went to work about it. We'll see what Farabee does about it.
Yeah, I think real quick, because I love Farabee. I bought a Farabee jersey last year, and then I was petrified that they were going to move him. But just seeing the way that he brings in some of the young kids under his wing, he's a guy that I feel like could be a future captain of this team, right? But here's my question, and the difference that in my mind between him and Sanheim, because I think that Farabee will probably be fine from the mental perspective. My question is, where's the opportunity? You're going to have Forster and Tippett presumably as the two top left wingers, and you're going to have Michkov and Konechny as the two top right wingers. Where, even if Farabee comes in and he plays great, where's going to be the opportunity to pile up points or play on the power play? I'm not sure that I see it. And then you're going to be paying a guy $5 million a year to play, on the third line with Ryan Paling and I don't know who. It's that's my question with him. Is Sanheim came in and because we didn't have any other choice, he was immediately given top pair defenseman minutes, and he came in and he proved everything. I think Farabee could come in and be absolutely fantastic this year, but I don't think he's going to be getting top minutes. So that's my question with Farabee.
Yeah, and so much of building a roster is how the pieces fit together on the ice and off the ice fiscally, right? And you mentioned the $5 million. To get paid to that next level, you got to build the stats. You need power play time. You need to play in the top six. And, they think a lot, obviously, of Tyson Forster and the way that he can shoot the puck. So he doesn't make sense on a third-line wing, right? Now, sometimes you can have – I've always looked at forwards and said, okay, there's usually a center and a winger that fit together, and the third guy always changes. It was like Giroux, Voracek, and who's on the other side. That's going to change as chemistry comes and goes. Who are those guys that are going to fit together? We don't know yet. It's one of the things that I think they missed out on last year was not finding a couple of those combinations that you can commit to and are going to work. Who is Tippett going to work with? Does he make the most sense with Morgan Frost? We saw some dynamic offensive play with those two, but does Forster make more sense there? Can you have Forster, Couturier, and then a Michkov? Do those two slow the game down too much for a guy like Michkov? So having talent and everything, it's got to fit. It's why the Tampa, you mentioned Braden Point, it's why the Tampa Bay Lightning were so good, because they had these other guys in Palat and Point, and the way they could play off each other at the same pace and the same levels of creativity made the lines so good in the combinations of talent. You see a lot of teams with talent, but they can't win because the pieces just don't think the right way. I mean, you can have the guy that plays on the other winger on Sidney Crosby's line, who, he's gotten so many guys paid because it's just hey, just listen to me on the bench. I'll tell you where to go. Go there, and you're going to get a lot of points, and you're going to get paid. and Crosby was never wrong about his assessment of what's available in a game. He's just disgusting. So how do those pieces fit? I don't know. We're trying to, who's Michkov going to play with? You go, okay, well, does he make sense? You move, only two players I think you can move to their off wing, and that's Tippett and Forster, because of their size and their strength on the boards in the D zone and the way they can shoot the puck on the off wing. So which one of those guys fits better with Michkov? And doesn't that really depend on the center too? So I don't know. Like I don't know how any of these pieces are going to fit together this year.
Do you think that
it does bring back the point that they lack the pairs, because the pairs are really based around center ice, and if center ice is not what you would need it to be, you're kind of stuck. And I think the Flyers are in this kind of.
Their top two centers were scratched last year. The captain, Couturier, was scratched for multiple games, and Frost was scratched, I think, for 8 games. I mean, what team is scratching their top two centers?
Yeah. We're talking about Farabee. I just wanted to follow up really quick, because he's one of those guys that I think can play a fairly responsible game. I've always wondered what he might look like at center. Like, let's say like Sean Couturier's injured at some point in the season. Like, I think he's coming off another surgery. I mean, I think people are sort of taking for granted that Couturier and Drysdale are going to be fine for the start of the season. Really
I don't think so.
Certain injuries, but
core surgery too.
Here's my question: have you ever looked at Farabee and thought to yourself, like, hey, like this guy, like, could he be like a good center? I don't know.
I thought early on that there was a chance he could play the middle, but I need more size and length up the middle, and he just doesn't provide that. I think he's responsible. Like when Tortorella first came in, I put together a list of players, and I think I actually have it right here. Who are the players that Torts is going to love? And on that list was Farabee, because of the way at the time he was killing penalties. There was a lot of sacrifice in his game. Which players will Torts take an immediate liking to? Lawton, Couturier, Atkinson, Noah Cates, possibly Provy. Boy, I wrote this on 9/11/2022. I found this the other day. This was like my questions going into that season. And like looking back at these top 20 questions is hilarious now. Like, who's going to take the leadership? Who's going to be the next captain? Who's going to be the backup goalie? Grosnick or Sandstrom? Like, disgusting answers to these questions a couple of years later. Ryan Ellis, is he going to be ready to start the season? I was asking that question when I wrote this email to myself. But, who are the guys that can kind of fall into that and maybe move to the middle? I don't think they feel like any other guys are guys that they want to move to the middle. I think Farabee offensively is just such a better perimeter player, and I think defending, he's a perimeter player as well. I don't think he's a guy that you want coming down below the dot to defend, because I don't think he's going to be able to get up the ice quick enough to be able to join a rush. Certainly, Couturier is not. To your point about Couturier and Drysdale, I think Couturier's season is totally flipped from what it was last year. I think it's off to a slow start and possibly finishes strong, not gets off to a good start and really limps down the stretch. Because remember, when Gostisbehere and Giroux both came off core surgeries, Drew had, the 52-point season coming off that core surgery? Mm-hmm. Like, that is, a lot of people don't realize so much of skating and shooting in hockey is all from the core. And breaking down that scar tissue sucks. It is awful. I remember talking to Brian Elliott about it. He had a core like groin surgery, and he talked about the whole first half of the next year trying to break down the scar tissue in his lower abdomen, and it's just hell to do that. And so I think people got to temper their expectation about Couturier coming into this year, coming off that. He doesn't have another half a step to lose. Never did. Now, he can think the game extremely well, amazing hockey IQ. I think Drysdale can mitigate that. I mean, even last year when he wasn't 100%, we were like, wow, look at this guy, the way he skates. It's ridiculous, right? I think he can mitigate that. But Couturier, I don't see him getting off to a fast start because of that. And, who does he fit with from a stylistic play standpoint? It's a really, really big question. And in this email, I asked myself, with Couturier coming back, can we bank that he's a 25-goal, 70-point player? Because he had 3 years where he had 76 points or more. A couple of 30-goal seasons, a 31 and a 33. I think 55 points is the new high level of expectation for Sean Couturier.
It's a sad state of affairs at center with this team. And again, like I said, I think people are assuming that Couturier and Drysdale are going to be fine for the start of the season, and we've already established that those surgeries take a while to recover from. I've heard people say, oh, well, these weren't like the real invasive kind of core surgeries. Yeah,
you got cut.
Right, exactly. So I don't know. I mean, it's
They give you anesthesia. It's not easy.
Yeah, right. So,
I mean, I just had the inguinal jobs. I had two. One was a double. Man, I feel like you got stabbed and it kicked in the, in the jewels.
Oh my! I had the inguinal hernia surgery 5 years ago now.
Oh yeah,
And for like a month, I felt like somebody took a sledgehammer to my sack. It was awful.
Yep.
Just brutal.
That's a good.
The line in my mind that works for me is Forster, Frost, and Michkov and I'm building things around Michkov because he's clearly, probably immediately going to be the smartest offensive player on the team. I mean, his brain's like an offensive supercomputer. I want someone out there that can kind of like think the game offensively at his level. And so for me, Morgan Frost, might be one of the only guys on this roster who can do that. And then I need a defensively responsible winger playing with those guys because neither Frost nor Michkov, although I think Frost really improved on the defensive side last year, but neither him nor Michkov are going to be known for their defense. And so I think a guy like Forster, who's really improved his board work and who was one of the better defensive forwards, I think, in the NHL last year, certainly on the Flyers, could be a good fit there. Plus, he's got that insane one-timer. So you've got, Michkov and Frost kind of making plays and they can set him up. So just in my mind's eye, that's kind of the trio I'd like to see is Forster, Frost, and Michkov. Who knows what it's actually going to be, but to me, that seems like it could be the best trio.
I totally agree because while the opposition is kind of mesmerized by look, we saw Frost do it in junior. Like that line he was on junior. You know why Frost couldn't defend when he got the NHL? Because he never defended in junior. They had the puck all the time. They just dominated the puck in junior. And I think Michkov and Frost can garner so much attention when a team's trying to defend them. Now you're going to have a guy in Forster who's got a bomb that you can set up and penalize the other team when they get too hyper-focused on those two guys kind of dancing around the offensive zone. So I totally agree. I think that's the line that I look at, like the chemistry of how the pieces fit, and I think it's the most logical offensive line, which means we probably won't see it until February.
Right, exactly. Well, that's my concern. I don't get too attracted to the idea because I'm like, it'll end up being like, Tippett, Paling, and Michkov or something like that.
Yeah.
I like Paling a lot. Tippett.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, let me mention something on Tippett real quick. I think Tippett needs a little bit of like tude to his game. Like I still don't think he understands how good he is and how dominant he can be. He's a little bit too much of a passenger sometimes for me. When things are going well, like you see, like some players, you can see their confidence. It's so apparent. And to me, he's one of those guys because he gets insanely offensively creative when he's confident. Like to pull off that spinorama move, like was ridiculous. Some of the other moves that he'll pull off when he's offensively confident. But he's got to realize, like, he's got a nuts and bolts element to his game, too. He's a great skater for a big body. Really powerful, fast, explosive. I'd like to see him take a little more contact at times to kind of get himself into a game and impact it when he's not, has the creative offensive playmaking. I think he still needs to realize how good he can be at the NHL level. He had 29 last year. There's no reason that if this power play can improve even 4%, I mean, how can they not? That he should not have 34 goals. There's no reason in the world. The guy shot the puck 1,000 times last year. That's not an issue. So I think that he's a guy that I'm looking for a really big season from. I mean, I think you're going to get your goals from him. I think they're going to score 41 more goals than they scored last year. Question is, are they going to give up 50 more goals than they kept out last year?
Yeah, that is a big question. I want to swing back to Kolosov for a minute, but I want to mention that the Flyers hired Oleg Zanarak as their European scouting consultant, and Reed Simpson as the director of European scouting, and focus in on Oleg Zanarak, who was pictured on Twitter with Michkov and Fedotov.
That was Slava.
It was Slava?
That's Slava Kuznetsov, I believe so. Yeah. In Colorado.
I thought that was Zanarak. I showed you what I know. Okay, so Slava, that was Slava with them. But the point is with Kolosov, and they hired this guy Zanarak, the idea is that they wanted to get a liaison, a go-between, to maybe prevent what has happened between the Flyers and Kolosov. Because if you want to criticize the Flyers in any way with this situation, it's that it did appear that there was like this language barrier. Maybe somebody who could have been a liaison could have like helped the situation out. And now it's kind of like a staring contest. And like you were saying earlier, it looks like the Flyers' real option here is to toll the contract, which, they're not going to give in and loan him, like you were saying. But Dan, you had some thoughts about Kolosov. Now, I wanted to circle back to that because you mentioned.
Yeah, the Kolosov situation is like fascinating. Between what happened and what's going to happen, right? Like, I don't know what happened. I mean, he seemed to be excited to sign the 3-year entry-level contract. He came over to the U.S. And then, I had heard he was extremely homesick, and that's the reason he went back home. Who knows what the actual truth is? I'm sure that being in a foreign country and not speaking the language, can be very difficult. I don't know what the actual truth is, but the fascinating thing now is going to be what happens now, because he has he's in the midst of this entry-level contract. So the Flyers own his rights unlike a player you draft from college, like Cutter Gauthier, where your rights for a player end after they're out of college. When you draft a player from Russia, you have their rights forever for the end of time if you so desire. So the Flyers have his rights forever. They've got him in the middle of a contract, and he theoretically is only supposed to be able to play somewhere else other than the Flyers organization if the Flyers agree to loan him out. So he's over in Russia. He's basically saying he wants to play for Minsk this year. However, the Flyers have made it clear that they are not going to loan him to Minsk. Now, the similar situation happened with Ivan Fedotov, except it was a little different. Fedotov, we had signed for a 1-year contract. The 1 year passed. He was in Siberia on a military aircraft. So then he comes back. He doesn't, his Russian team says, hey, his 1 year's done, and now he can play for us. The Flyers disagreed. They said, look, it was just a 1 year deal, but because he couldn't play for us, we're tolling that contract for a year, which means we are going to, basically that contract goes back and it can't play for it goes to the next year. Well, Kolosov's much different than Fedotov. Fedotov won a championship in the KHL. Fedotov led the Russian team to the silver medal in the Olympics. Kolosov's 22 years old. So the question is Fedotov's team defied the IIHF when they allowed him to play last year, even though the Flyers said they had a contract with him. It's much clearer this time around. It's much clearer that Kolosov has a contract with the Flyers because it was a 3-year deal, which is still in effect. And also, will Dynamo Minsk, who they've already signed a bunch of goalies for this season, expecting that Kolosov was not going to be playing in the in Russia, are they going to basically want to fight the IIHF and the NHL and say, look, we're going to disregard the Flyers contract and let this guy play for us, even though the Flyers haven't loaned him? So I don't think that the Dynamo is going to take that risk. So then the question becomes, okay, Kolosov, you're not going to play North America if he doesn't come, and the Flyers aren't going to loan you out. What are you going to do? No, he's not going to be able to play anywhere unless some team wants to defy the contract that he has with the Flyers. So that's where, if he decides not to come back here, it's going to be very interesting, because I don't think his Russian team is going to defy the contract that the Flyers have.
Their season's already starting.
He's going to have to, what's that?
Their season's already starting. KHL's underway.
He's going to have to make a decision. And for me, hopefully he will come back over. But I can understand where the Flyers are coming from, because let's just say that the Flyers decide to terminate his contract, which is what he wants, and then somehow 4 years from now he's back in the NHL with the Rangers, everyone is going to rip the Flyers for it. So even if they've not handled the situation poorly, I don't think they can just terminate the contract. I think they have to stick to their guns and be like, look, you have a contract with us. If you want to play in the NHL, it's going to be with us. We're not going to loan you to any other team, and kind of see what happens. But that one's going to be fascinating.
It's all about precedent. It's all about
Yes.
precedent. You
Yeah.
already have the situation that happened with Gauthier. He didn't want to be here. Those Cutter Gauthier and Alexei Kolosov, the situations are so different. But they're comparable because it's the optics of both players didn't want to play here with this regime. I don't have any clue if it had anything to do with this regime. I don't think it does. But that's the optics of it. And, you cannot let guys that you draft and put work into and made an agreement with. I mean, they loaned him last year. They brought him over. He drug his feet coming last year. He was supposed to come earlier, and he wasn't motivated to come. Sometimes guys want to hate it. You know what I mean? They're afraid of going to this other world, and I understand. I don't know how the Flyers could have signed somebody that late in the year to be the token Russian for him to have somebody to talk to. But, this situation, I don't think I can move forward with him because he's killed the trust. We had an agreement. We agreed to loan you to Dynamo Minsk the year prior. And then you did come over, even though you drug your feet. And now you're not coming over. I mean, you're planning your goaltending depth chart based on these things, on guys you drafted. They had to go out and sign Eetu Mäkiniemi, the Finn, to have some depth here. Because you can run out of goalie depth like that. That it can happen quicker at that position than any other position. You go, oh, but we have great goalie depth, until you don't, which is really fast. So that's a knife in the back. You did not keep your word. And I understand this is a kid, and I understand all that. But again, he's not a sure thing either. But the whole thing for me with this is the Cutter Gauthier thing combined with this, and a little bit the Ryan Johansson thing. It's one thing that I've been critical of this front office of this summer was there's a little too much noise for my liking that doesn't have anything to do with hockey. Now, there was noise, obviously, with Michkov and Embers, and is he coming over, and eventually did, and that's great. But there's a little too much ancillary negative attention happening between the Johansson thing, between Kolosov, and how the Cutter Gauthier thing happened. So I don't think you can be a noisy organization. I think they need to get a handle on that. It's something I plan on asking Danny and Keith Jones about when training camp starts. Is this, being in the headlines and being a team that people are talking about is great for the right reasons. You don't want it to be for noise, and there's a little too much noise for my liking. There are years the Eagles were incredibly noisy as an organization. They went nowhere like that. You got to get a handle on it.
I just want to ask Jason real quick. So you said that you think the trust is broken. You wouldn't be able to move forward.
Would be for me. I don't know if I have not talked to them specifically.
Okay, but so I'm asking you. So what would you do with Kolosov?
Well, I mean, I can't get anything for him in a trade. I'm holding the line because of precedent. I'm not setting a precedent that a player can do this to us and get away with it. So he's going to sit on his ass.
You're saying the trust is broken. What if he says, "Okay, I'm ready to come over"? Would you? I can't. Are you?
He's got to do that now. I can't wait 6 months.
Right.
I mean, I think they already know he's not coming over by the fact that they signed McIniemi and they've had to make moves.
Yeah, it sure seems like he's not coming over.
Yeah,
but
I mean, Danny says we can't get a firm answer. I mean, to me,
if the Russians hold the line and don't let him play, something's going to have to give because I assume he'll want to play hockey again in his life.
Yeah, I mean, or else he's leaving a lot of money on the table, right? Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. There's no right way to do it, to deal with this, because you go, okay, we want to hold the line and not set the precedent, but it was like the Cutter Gauthier thing. We could wait him out after 3 years and a massively, an asset that's just depreciating more by the day, or we can try and make the best of it as quickly as we can. They're far different because Cutter Gauthier was shredding in college and is a high-end prospect. Kolosov is a goalie. Nobody even knows if he wants to come over here. And there's huge question marks about his game and his size and all of that. So, yeah, I don't know what the right answer is right now, but if I made that deal with him and agreed to loan him last year and he pulled this year, I'd be mighty pissed. I would be. And I'd be mad at the agent, too. And he fired his agent, and and changed representation. Why are you changing representation? You got a 3-year contract. So
Yeah,
there's
Dan
so many
Milstein.
things here. Yeah, so many things here
Represents
I
him
don't
now.
like. I don't like.
It sounds
and they're
very
red flags to me.
manipulative. Yeah. Let me ask you, Jason, before we let you go, and appreciate you taking the time with us today. Which one of these kids do you think could earn that, whether it's a 9-game look or just a couple game look with an impressive showing? We know that Michkov obviously is here to play for the Philadelphia Flyers. So obviously among players like Bonk and Luchanko, those are guys that are in that category. Because Tomala, he's part of the organization now, so it's
Yeah, he's in the AHL team. And
right.
He doesn't fall into the trap. He's waiver exempt.
Right.
But when I look at, to me, there's only one guy that's a possibility that you even take a look at for multiple games at the NHL level. But where does he fit? Because you have the numbers game, and if you keep Bonk to play the first 6 or 8 or 9 games before you got to make that decision at 10 games, you're exposing guys that aren't waiver exempt. So I think it's really unlikely that he gets that look at the NHL because of that trickle. Now, you can hold on to a guy for a couple of games and go, hey, let's give Bonk 3 games, and then we're going to send him back. Let's just send him back with the knowledge of what it takes at this level. I think he already knows. To Dan's point earlier, being the son of a former NHL player, there's so much maturity to his game already. And the fact that he's playing in London, where I don't think there's a junior team on the planet that does a better job preparing their players for the NHL than London does, and the Hunter brothers, the way they do it there. I mean, they're a good team up there year in and year out for the most part. But it really is about developing those players in the London system for the next levels. It's about the long game. So he's the only guy I think that even is an option, and I still think it's unlikely.
Okay. Dan, anything from you?
No.
If a goalie got hurt, maybe Bjarnason. Maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we're going to see anything too unexpected. I think it's really all going to be about Michkov, and man, I can't wait to see him. I'm going to be going to, I live down in DC. I'm going to be going to the Flyers Caps preseason game, which is on the 22nd. I think it's one of the first preseason games.
3:00 in the afternoon on the Sunday.
Yeah, they open
3:00 in the afternoon. So I'm hoping that I'll get to see Michkov in that game, and then I can't wait to see it.
I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to see him this weekend. I'm doing both the games on the Flyers YouTube channel with Brian Smith from the PPL Center. We're doing Friday's game at 7 and Saturday's game at 5. I don't know if he's going to play in either of them.
Oh, why wouldn't
he? Those games can be a little bit of running around. You know what I mean?
In terms of people trying to hit,
some guys trying to make a little bit. And look, when you're trying to make a name for yourself, you look for the biggest target on the other team, the one that's going to garner you the most attention.
Is Hunter McDonald going to be in those games? They can.
Oh yeah.
So there you go.
That certainly helps.
Or they can dress up Nick Delorier as like an 18-year-old.
Well, last year in both of them, Matt Rempe played in both of them, and he got in a fight last year.
That's right. Yeah.
He fought the same guy 2 years in a row. Who the hell did he fight in that game? I can't remember. But somebody fought him 2 years in a row. He was an animal. Now he's a rock star with the Rangers.
He can play a little bit, though. He's got a little something. He's not total.
Very little something.
Yeah.
There's not much little about him, but But somebody said, in regards to me not thinking that Michkov were playing those games, well, the almighty dollar, and Flyers see the dollar sign here. They could sell out that place 10 days in a row as long as Michkov's playing. I go, yeah, Flyers don't own the Lehigh Valley Phantoms or the PPL Center. They are not an owned and operated team by the Philadelphia Flyers. They are an affiliate. They are owned by a different group. So it's not going to benefit their wallet.
One thing, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. Luchanko, if he really plays well, they could give him a little bit of a look, just to say
again,
hey,
though. But who you taking out to put him in?
Yeah,
who's not playing center?
They have all this depth.
Injuries could change it.
Yeah,
like if Couturier's not ready to go, right?
Are they going to make some kind of small trade or something before the season? Because they got so many bodies that aren't waiver eligible.
Like I look at. There's a few things that were a bit of a head scratcher for me. Yinning and Adder are not waiver exempt. Where do they fit in? I think they would clear waivers, both of them, though. That being said, but then I look at the extension of Garnet Hathaway a year early, and I wondered about that. Like, to commit like that to that type of player for 2 more years when he's got another year left. Like, I wonder about those things. So I'm just trying to look at the puzzle pieces and see how they fit together here when you have money and you can add some more high-end talent, either draft or free agency or trade. It's going to be an interesting year around the league. Who's going to become available? Does Ottawa sputter again, and does Brady Tkachuk become available? I know Dan's head just went. Brady Tkachuk, okay. Tkachuk, I'll take Walt. I'll take the old man still. Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so disappointed that not surprised that Draisaitl re-signed, because one of my dreams was signing Draisaitl or McDavid, but it sure does seem like I don't know. I don't know how this team's going to get the franchise center. It does seem like
I would not have been in favor of signing Draisaitl to that deal. 14. I don't think it's going to age well.
Yeah, that's fine, but I don't know how we get our franchise center. So I had these dreams of, it'll come via free agency. Well, probably not.
Yeah, you have to see where things go, and I think the most likely route has to be through the hockey trade. Like Jack Eichel got moved, right? Now he was depreciated at that point because of the neck thing and all that, but there are guys that will become available. And do you have to have the superstar to add if Michkov is a star, like a superstar? Do you need that kind of center? Can you like go out circa the Blues and grab Ryan O'Reilly, like that kind of player?
Right,
really good player.
If you can stack a couple, like 3 solid number 2 centers instead of having a one.
Vegas did too.
It's doable. Yeah.
Vegas had 3 number 2 lines and a third line in their first year. They didn't have a fourth line and they didn't have a top line. But they just killed you because of their depth.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. Jay, you're into so many things. You still doing the Stick to F1 podcast? And
no, I'm not doing that one. That's on hiatus right now. I'm doing Odgies with Harry.
Okay.
That podcast, still doing when the season starts, we'll get to some more Stick to Hockey, and then obviously Flyers Daily, and also doing now the Locked On Eagles postcast, where Harry and I do an Eagles postgame show. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this, man. Yeah.
Anytime, boys.
And feel better.
Yeah, it was great chatting and having you on. And
seeing you guys around the rink. It's that time of year, boys.
Rink, baby. Let's get it going.
I don't got to make up any more topics for all summer.
No. I don't know. Our top 10 list of Flyers you'd most like to see anywhere. I don't know. God,
I'm exhausted.
The listicle.
Yep. Boys, I'll see you. Thanks.
You take care.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
All righty. So, yeah, that was fun. Yeah, no, it was definitely fun. So, I mean, it all begins. What's that?
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I mean, it all starts. I mean, listen, the rookie games are the rookie games, and you get your first glance at certain players, and then you get your second glance, like Jay was saying in the very beginning, at other players, and you see if they look a little bit better, a little faster, a little stronger, what have you. But the rookies do what they do. Then a week later, a week from this Thursday, the vets start. They start on ice, and they turn around 3 days later, like you're going to be there, right? At Washington, at the Capitals.
The game on the
Flyers
22nd.
Visit. Right, the 22nd.
Yeah, the preseason. Yep.
Right. So then the next night after that, the Flyers play, probably a different squad in Montreal.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's going to be like. I bet you I'm not sure Michkov's going to be playing that one. Who knows, right? We did that show with Amy Johnson. You were in Japan at the time about this crazy obsession that some group of Montreal Canadiens fans had about Michkov. It's like when they drafted Demidov, I wasn't like, oh, I hope he fails, and it'll take pressure off of I don't know, Luchanko. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy.
Yeah, and today I don't know if you saw, but they Ska scratched Michkov or scratched Demidov from the game. So
Right.
of course all of the Canadiens fans were talking about how last year, the fact that they sent Michkov to their quote unquote farm team and to Sochi, and they didn't want him to play. Like, that shows you that Michkov just didn't really have what it takes. And of course now they're doing basically the same thing to Demidov.
Right.
And so I saw there was a tweet today from one of the Canadiens fans being like, "Oh God, I'm fearing what the Flyers fans will say when they see that Demidov has been scratched by SKA." It's just the reality. But what you said, we want Demidov to succeed. Like, I like watching good hockey players. These Canadian fans are crazy. Like, they literally want Michkov to fail. It's a little nuts, and it starts with Grant McCagg, who I have a very high opinion of. I'm a fan of his stuff. I think he's a good scout, but he had written this article basically that was like talking about how, well, he's not rooting against Michkov because he doesn't like Michkov, but he's rooting against him because of the expectations and how people compare him to Reinbacher from the Canadiens fans. You can't write an article or tweet about how you're, as a professional, about how you're rooting against a 19-year-old kid to fail. Like, come on. And he's setting the tone for those fans there. I mean,
I know. And he said it on the podcast, and he tweeted out that Amy and Shep and I, went through that on the O&B special that we did on the last show. And we had actually a pretty positive show about what Montreal's doing compared to where the Flyers are at. And we think there's going to be a convergence at some point that could be a rivalry that lasts for quite a while. But I think more is going to have to go right for the Flyers from where things stand right now than for Canadians, who seem like they're better positioned. So what the hell are these Canadian fans, like, what are they so worried about? It's just crazy.
The Canadians have a great farm system. They've got great young talent on the roster. We're the team that's worried about, we don't have anything behind Michkov coming, especially from a center position, where the Canadians they're set. They've got Suzuki, they've got Kirby Doc, they've got Slavkovsky on the wing, they've got Cole Caulfield, they've got Lane Hudson, who's a better defense prospect than anyone the Flyers have in their system. Like, they're loaded. They've got Fowler, the goalie who plays at Boston University, I believe, who's like one of the best young goalies out there. Like, they're loaded everywhere. Like, why are they so worked up about Michkov?
I think that they just cracked under the pressure. It might have been the I guess you would call it the trauma of the whole Kotkaniemi thing. That might be what behind when recruits and Grant. I didn't mention Grant's name last show. I didn't want to dump on him per se. So a lot of people don't even know who he is. And to me, he's lost a lot of credibility with this. But I think that when he put his imprimatur on the Kotkaniemi draft pick, and I was like, no, this kid is way overdrafted. He was a good player. He should have been taken in the middle of the round, and it set the player and the organization up to fail. And then eventually he left, and they rushed him into the league. He played well in that final and in that playoff run, but he really hasn't been the same player since. He's a nice player, but there's no way he should have been drafted 3 overall. They just drafted out of need, and that's what ends up happening. So I think maybe they were traumatized by that, and are going to see Reinbacher and Michkov. But still, I've never rooted. Like, I've made the comparison that when Montreal drafts Cole Caulfield, and we had a chance to draft him. We draft Cam York. We weren't there saying, "Oh, I hope Caulfield stinks. I hope he gets hurt." Or I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, no, it is. It's crazy, and I don't know. I'll be rooting for Demidov. Whatever.
Yeah, hope he's a great player. I hope it works out for him and Michkov, and maybe one day Russia will be in international play, and we'll have all this other stuff behind it. So with that, just a reminder about Jim's South Street. You were just there.
I was there. I was at Jim's a few days ago.
So you can attest.
Yeah,
40 years of the greatest cheesesteaks.
It's fantastic. I love going there. This is the first time I've been there since it burned down and they built it back up, and it's great. I mean, they've got a brand new seating area adjacent to the the old gyms, and they built, the old gyms is basically they built it back up. It looks just like it did before, except it's, more modern. And then they've got this new seating area. No, when I come into Philly and go to Flyers games with my mom, we love going to gyms before the game. And it like completes the Philadelphia experience for me.
Fantastic. 400 South Street down in Philadelphia, PA. Jim South Street. Get there. If you've lived down there, DoorDash, Uber Eats, whatever it takes, get that delicious food. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And with that, just a reminder, the O&B Puckcast is on several podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, Deezer. We have a YouTube page. Just plug in their O&B Puckcast, Facebook page. Same thing, because when you rate and subscribe, it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And of course, what we are. And the next time we do get a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, if you would be so kind, we will read it on the air. You can catch us on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck, on Getter, our backup plan at O&B Puckcast. Sometimes we put some stuff in there. It's a little saucier than what we put on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. D Silver at D Silver 88 where they catch you. Is that right, Dan?
Yeah, at DSilver88 on Twitter. You can catch me there. And as we get ready for this season, like I said, I'll be going to some of the preseason games. I'll go to the one in DC, and then I'll be at the home opener against Vancouver. And then I'll go to the regular season game in DC here the week after. I can't wait for the season. I've got the same concerns everyone else does about various things, but I just can't wait to watch Michkov out there and watch the kid develop.
That's it, man. That's what this season's about. This and maybe some magic at the gym. We were hoping he was going to pull this summer, maybe during in season. Maybe he'll do something. And of course, you can follow Chef B at Chef2, the number 2, the left B, at Chef2, the left B. And he should be back with us hopefully in our next show. We'll have a camp report coming up. But as for tonight, we thank you for listening to us. And until next time, everybody, take care.